We don't abandon our pursuits because we despair of ever perfecting them. Epictetus. Today we're covering airplanes and aerodynamics. Here's the battle plan. We'll start with a short scenario. We'll give you the opportunity to cover basic flight maneuvers. We'll get into airplanes and aerodynamics, do a quiz, and assign some homework. So in the next video, we've flown into the clouds and we have to fly solely by reference to the instruments. So let's watch and see what we can learn. So first of all, as VFR pilots, we really don't want to be flying into the clouds like this. But if we do, we want to be able to fly by reference to the instruments. So our attitude indicator and our turn and slip coordinator are both indicating a turn to the right, as is our heading indicator. Our speed's at 80 knots, and looks like we're in a climb. Looks like we're still holding that right turn. And it looks like we're rolling out of the turn. Attitude indicator is indicating a turn to the right, and our turn and slip coordinator is looking like wings level. Our airspeed's decreasing. And now it looks like we're in a turn to the left according to our turn and slip coordinator and heading indicator. And our attitude indicator is actually looks like it's frozen in a turn to the right. So we might need to stop paying attention to this guy here. Vertical speed just shot up, altitude is climbing, and we are losing airspeed, so I imagine we're in a nose-high attitude right now. And our vertical speed is dropping, so we've come to a nose-low attitude, and airspeed's increasing. Airspeed just shot up again, we're probably nose-high. Airspeed's settling down at 80, it looks like, so we're in a climb. And vertical speed's dropping again, back to 0. So if I were to guess, I would say we are, well, now we're turning to the right. In a slight right turn, heading indicator is also indicating a turn to the right, and so is our compass. Alright, it's your turn now. Call out what you see in the aircraft as we fly along. The point of that exercise is to give you some experience flying by reference to the instruments. As you progress in your career, you definitely want to think about becoming an instrument-rated pilot. Alright, now it's your turn. What are the 4 basic flight maneuvers? If you'd like, you can submit feedback at the end of this lesson to show what you've learned. Let's get into the left turning tendencies of the aircraft. The 4 left turning tendencies are the torque reaction from the engine and propeller, the corkscrewing effect of the slipstream, gyroscopic action of the propeller, and asymmetric loading of the propeller. So what are the 4 left turning tendencies? Torque reaction from the engine and propeller, corkscrewing effect of the slipstream, gyroscopic action of the propeller, and asymmetric loading of the propeller. Aircraft and everything else follows Newton's laws of physics. Newton's third law of physics says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Torque is a force that produces a twisting or rotating motion, and in an airplane there's a tendency to roll in the opposite direction of the rotation of the engine and the propeller. Now if you think about a helicopter, why does a helicopter have 2 rotors? Well, it's kind of the same reason. As the propeller or as the rotors spin in one direction, the helicopter wants to turn in the other direction, and the pilot has to control that yaw using the second rotor, the tail rotor. In our aircraft, the propeller spins in one direction and the aircraft wants to roll in the opposite direction. So what are the 4 left turning tendencies? Again, go. They are torque reaction from the engine and propeller, corkscrewing effect of the slipstream, gyroscopic action of the propeller, and asymmetric loading of the propeller. Remember that These affect the aircraft most in slow flight, at lower speeds, high angle of attack, and high power, and constant altitude. What's Newton's third law of physics? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And what is torque? Torque is a force that produces a twisting or rotating motion. In an airplane, there's a tendency to roll in the opposite direction of the rotation of the engine and propeller. Let's talk about the corkscrewing effect of the slipstream. The high-speed rotation of the propeller gives a corkscrew rotation to the slipstream. So as the propeller forces air backwards, it rotates about the aircraft, and it strikes the vertical fin here, causing a yawing motion about the vertical axis and a rolling motion about the longitudinal axis. Now let's talk about gyroscopes. The two fundamental gyroscopic principles are rigidity in space and gyroscopic precession. All right, repeat back. What are the two fundamental principles? Rigidity in space and gyroscopic precession. Precession is the resultant action or deflection of a spinning rotor when a deflection force is applied to its rim. So as the gyroscope is spinning, if you apply a force here, it's going to feel the effective force here at the top of the disc, and it's actually going to feel the resultant force 90 degrees away from where you would expect it to feel, and cause a yawing motion. Similarly, our aircraft can be thought of as a gyroscope. So the tail wants to come up, you feel an effective force at the top of the disc, and it creates a yawing motion 90 degrees away from the initial place that you would put that force and cause a yawing motion. Now let's talk about P factor, or asymmetric loading of the propeller. This happens at high angles of attack. In a low angle of attack, the blade takes out an equal chunk of air as it climbs and descends. When we have a high angle of attack, one propeller blade is actually taking a larger bite out of the air than the other side, and that larger chunk is creating asymmetric thrust. And that asymmetric thrust on the propeller disc causes a yawing motion. So what are the four left turning tendencies again? Torque reaction from the engine and propeller, the corkscrewing effect of the slipstream, gyroscopic action of the propeller, and asymmetric loading of the propeller. Now talk to me about asymmetric loading. Asymmetric loading happens at high angles of attack. It's because one blade is taking a greater bite out of the air than the other, creating asymmetric thrust. And that asymmetric thrust causes a yawing motion. Now let's talk about load factor. Load factor refers to the additional weight carried by the wings due to the airplane's weight plus centrifugal force. The amount of excess load that can be imposed varies directly with the airplane's speed and lift available. At high speeds, lifting capability is so great that the load factor can quickly exceed safety limits. One of my favorite rides when I went to the carnival when I was a kid was the Gravitron. You would lean against a wall and the Gravitron would spin so fast that you would get pushed to the outside and get stuck to a wall. And you can actually pull your feet off the ground and just stay on the outside of the wall because of this principle here, centrifugal force. So the same thing's happening in the aircraft. The steeper your turn, the greater the load factor and the greater the load the wings have to carry. Load factor refers to the additional weight carried by the wings due to the airplane's weight plus what? Centrifugal force. An increased load factor will result in an airplane stalling at a higher airspeed. So as the bank angle increases, the load factor increases. So we want to be careful pulling really hard in a steep turn. The wings must carry not only the airplane's weight, but the centrifugal force as well. So this chart kind of shows you the load that you would have to carry in various angles. So when we're flying wings level, we have, that's not level at all. When we're flying wings level, we have a load factor of 1. We are pulling 1G. As we pull steeper and steeper turns up to 60 degrees, we're going to start feeling 2Gs, and we're going to pull down into our seat. So really feeling this turn here. And the higher the angle goes, the greater the load factor. This is a velocity versus G load chart. Here on the x-axis, we have the indicated airspeed and the load factor on the vertical axis. Here we have our normal stall speed. And you can kind of see, as you increase the speed, your aircraft can take a higher load factor up to a certain point. So our typical stall speed is here, line Alpha Juliet at about, 65 knots. But as we increase the bank angle, or as we increase the load factor, we can actually stall out at a higher speed, 120 knots. If we pull a 4G turn, we're going to stall the aircraft, even though our normal stall speed is only 65 knots. So this right here is the maximum structural cruise speed, and this is the never exceed speed. We want to be really careful here, and we never want to exceed this speed here. Pulling anything greater than a 3.5 G turn at these speeds is going to break the aircraft. This is, danger zone here. This line, CE, is our positive limit load factor. Line IGF is our negative limit load factor. These are negative Gs. And remember, the amount of excess load that can be imposed on the wing of an airplane depends upon the speed of the aircraft. So the higher you go, up to a certain point, you can pull more Gs. Let's go back. What are the two fundamental gyroscopic principles? Rigidity in space and gyroscopic precession. All right, pause here. Take 5 minutes to jot down what you can remember from the lesson, and then let's move on to our quiz. Ready? Pause. All right, let's hit it. In what flight condition are torque effects more pronounced in single-engine airplane? Low airspeed, high power, high AOA. The amount of excess load that can be imposed on the wing of an airplane depends upon the speed of an airplane. If an airplane weighs 4,500 pounds, what approximate weight would the airplane structure be required to support during a 45-degree turn while maintaining altitude? 6,750 pounds. The airspeed indicated by points Alpha and Juliet is the normal stall speed. Pretend you didn't see this. A positive limit load factor of 2 at 80 miles per hour would cause the airplane to do what? Load factor of 2, 80 miles an hour, right here. Looks like it'll stall. That was our third discussion of aerodynamics and airplanes. Keep reading the Airplane Flying Handbook, chapters 1 through 3, and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, chapters 1 through 3, and test yourself. Go to this website here and do 5 questions per day. I would love to hear your feedback for the first 3 lessons. Let me know what you think. Either send me a message directly or submit some feedback when you get prompted to. And here are my references. And thanks for watching. See ya.